Howdy again everyone, and by popular demand I can finally present a review of this little beast, the new Canon RF 85mm f2 Macro IS STM, which is only for Canon EOS R system mirrorless cameras. I had trouble getting hold of a copy of this lens back last year when it officially came out, so Canon kindly loaned one to me for a couple of weeks for testing, which I greatly appreciate, although I'm happy to reassure you that this is still a completely independent review. 85mm lenses on full-frame cameras will be popular until the end of time itself due to their useful, short telephoto field of view, which draws you nice and close for portrait and subject photography, while not being so tight that it can't be used for anything else. Most 85mm lenses have a maximum aperture at least a little bit brighter than just f2, but that's still useful enough to gather the light you need for shooting indoors or getting nicely out of focus backgrounds, as you can see here. Canon are fulfilling their promise that new RF lenses will have unique features yet again here by giving this lens its own image stabilizer and a very handy 1:2 ratio macro feature, meaning it can focus extra closely to your subject for some great semi-macro images. Those two features make the lens much more flexible in all kinds of ways and certainly easier to use if your camera doesn't already have image stabilization. Here's some footage with the stabilization turned off and now turned on. As you can see, even at this close distance, it's making quite a good difference, offering a steadier image for handheld video work and sharper still images. This lens costs £650 in the UK or $600 US, so depending on whatever sales tax you have to pay in America, it's potentially a bit of a better deal over there. It's on the expensive side for an 85mm lens with only an aperture of f2, but considering all those extra features, if its basic image quality is nice and sharp, then it could turn into a good deal for a lens with lots of potential. This lens's size and weight are certainly bigger than usual for a moderately wide aperture 85mm lens, as you can see against its predecessor here, but it doesn't feel too bulky really. It's made of plastic and it feels a little wobbly, probably due to the image stabilization system inside, but it has a little weight to it too, at 500 grams or just over a pound. It's based on a metal lens mount without any weather sealing. Some good news is that the lens has a number of controls on the outside for image stabilization, auto and manual focus, and a handy focus limiter too. The lens's focus ring is made of plastic and turns averagely smoothly, but works with the focus motor a bit slowly. In common with many other lenses with a macro capability, the lens displays a lot of focus breathing as you focus in and out. Let's look at its autofocus system now. A little criticism is necessary here. Its speed is somewhat pedestrian and the STM motor makes a clear whirring sound as it works. The front of the lens extends as it focuses, but at least it doesn't turn around or anything like they did years and years ago. When shooting in video mode, the focus speed slows right down to minimize noise, although an occasional and very quiet click can still be heard here and there. Another occasional problem I noticed was focus hunting, which can really be annoying when the lens is just determined to go the wrong way as slowly as possible. Thank goodness Canon included that focus limiter switch on the side of the lens in order to reduce that problem. Anyway, further down the lens we get a customizable control ring with clicks to it, which can be used to control all kinds of functions. Canon offer a service where they can remove those clicks for you for a price. The lens comes with front and rear caps, but no hood. One is available separately. Its front filter size is 67mm wide. Overall, the lens functions perfectly well, although its focus system is on the leisurely side. Now let's take a look at image quality. I'll be testing it on a 45MP Canon EOS R5. Straight from f2, in the middle of the image we see blazingly sharp image quality and very good contrast. And over in the corners, they're really impressive, only a little softer than the middle. That's an awesome performance for a moderately priced lens on a full-frame 45MP camera. Stop down to f2.8 for more brightness and contrast in those corners, and stop down to f4 for just a little more sharpness there too. The lens stays this sharp down to f11, although diffraction causes a tiny drop in contrast. f16 starts getting softer and f22 is soft, although that's the normal effect of diffraction. Overall, considering that it's meant to be a mid-range lens, this thing's resolution and contrast make quite an impression. If you want a brilliantly sharp 85mm optic for a reasonable price, then this is clearly the one for you. Now let's take a look at distortion and vignetting. These are corrected for you by your camera, but you can see the lens's true performance by turning those corrections off. Here we see some moderate pincushion distortion and pretty clear vignetting in the corners at f2. Stop down to f2.8 and f4 and it eventually goes away, leaving even brightness across the image. Now let's see about close-up image quality. With its 1:2 magnification ratio, this lens isn't quite a full macro lens, but it can get you really close to any small subject, which is great fun. At f2, the close-up image quality is fairly sharp, but contrast takes a hit and we see some purple fringing on contrasting edges also. Stop down to f2.8 and the contrast greatly improves, and at f4 we see a little more sharpness too. The effects of diffraction kick in at brighter apertures the more closely you're shooting, and so now you only need to stop down to f8 for a tiny bit of softness to begin creeping in. On a lower resolution camera than the EOS R5, you won't notice this at f8, but you will at f11, and the EOS R5 gets noticeably softer there. Here's f16 and f22. So when shooting at close distances, for the best results, shoot between f2.8 and f11. How well does this lens work against bright light? It's not a great performance here actually. We can see quite a lot of contrast and some broad flaring, so for critical photography you might want to purchase a lens hood. Let's see about the quality of this lens's bokeh. Generally, it's really soft actually, even with quite difficult backgrounds. One thing to note is that bokeh balls on the image periphery suffer from a really quite strong cat's eye shape, although that's fairly normal for most bright aperture lenses. And related to bokeh is longitudinal chromatic aberration. Here we can see that bokeh highlights see some purple and green fringing at f2, it's still there at f2.8, but at f4 it's virtually gone. So then, overall, when I first heard that this lens would cost £650, I was pretty concerned about how recommendable it would be, but upon testing it out, the price does make sense because it's an excellent performer, formidably sharp with good quality bokeh, helpful image stabilization, and an enjoyable and useful macro capability. Portrait photography purists may prefer to get a lens with a brighter aperture, like this very nice Samyang alternative, which is a slightly cheaper option in the UK, but oddly a little more expensive in the US. Then again, the Canon lens is quite a bit sharper at the same apertures and has those extra features, so you have a nice healthy choice there. Those who go for this Canon lens will be delighted really, and so it has to come highly recommended.